gonna go over if today's question is, does niche maxing work? Right? You know, and how you gonna know which niche maxing work for you? So this is gonna be a general video that's going pretty much. I'm gonna briefly brush over. I want to briefly brush over the each of the niches, each of the general niches, in general, you know, and then I'm gonna talk about the niches. I'm gonna talk about the phenotype ish looking niches, right? Obviously, the general, like off of just looks, and then I'm gonna talk about the overall like aesthetic niches, right? In general, just like a vibe you give off and stuff like that. Right after, so I'm gonna briefly brush over those, and then I'm gonna go into each one in depth in their own separate videos. So ooh, ooh. So let's get started. So we're gonna go on TikTok. All right, let's see. Yeah, I won't trip. I can't find TikTok. What the? So obviously, so okay. So first, we're gonna get started with. So first, let's break it down, right? So we're gonna break down, right? Because what I try to do, I try to explain things for you guys, but I try to be as optimistic as I can as well for you guys. You know what I'm saying? I try not to push. I know what this channel is called, but I try to also push solutions for you guys because I don't want to just only be some niche down, doomer, true sell type channel. I don't want to be that. Like I want to inspire people, but I also want to make sure people know what's real and what's the truth. And I'm always going to push. One of my big models on this channel, I'm going to tell people is, you know, yeah, the truth isn't always pleasant. Most often it's not, but at least you know the truth. Now, what do you want to do with that truth? How does that truth work for you? It doesn't, it's what it is. Move on, learn something else. Something will work for you. Not necessarily, you don't have to be dating, but it could be money, it could be any avenue in life. You know what I'm saying? Try to focus on what you got the most accessible in your hands. You know what I'm saying? You got money working for you, you got looks working for you, you got, avenues, financially and stuff like that. Give me 1 second. All right, to get started, before I get started and go over examples and stuff like that, so we're gonna briefly go into what's niche maxing, right? All right, so boom. Damn, there's no results. What the? Serious? Man, they usually have everything there is to know. Next best thing. .org. Right? Because I want to find a nice example. So boom. Because I could explain it, but sometimes you can find better definitions by more forum type things. They can explain it really well, right? It's kind of help me out, do the work for me. So boom, what's niche maxing, right? So if we look at Becky makeup, Darcy, oh my gosh. Oh my gosh, .org, yo, they suck. All right, just leave it to me, bro. So niche maxing is essentially just fitting a niche. That's essentially what it is, right? So when you niche match, you fit a niche, right? And what's a niche? A niche, in terms of the looks community, right? Looks maxing. A niche is simply a certain look or aesthetic that you have, that you fit, a certain aesthetic or behavior slash vibe you give off, pretty much like an aura. So your appearance, your demeanor and stuff like that overall, that kind of has a certain aura to it, has a certain vibe to it, like almost like a, yeah, like a somewhat like a personality kind of type, right? Like a, it's like a vibe, right? You know what I'm saying? And if you want, most women, if we're talking about female gays, most women, they like something that's a story, right? So niches usually settle a story. For example, right? What you notice, right? You notice it's a certain look, right? It's a certain vibe that he's selling, right? Obviously he's gonna have good looks, but you even have, like, for example, you even have some guys who are not as necessarily good looking who fits the aesthetic, and it raises thing. Of course, it's Pinterest, so they're gonna show the best of the best. But you got regular guys who, and it's not necessarily thug maxing, because you don't. It's not necessarily thug. You just have to have like dark triad traits. You don't have to look it per se, but you just have to have like dark triad vibe or traits. So blacks, certain stuff you wear. Each culture is different, and I'll go into that when I go into the like bad boyish type of vibe, right? But that's more of like a secondary. That's like a secondary niche, right? Your primary niche, because as you know, in this community, your looks is first. That's biology, right? So your looks is first. So your looks niche or your pheno niche is your primary, and then your whatever you want to call it, aura or just aesthetic, the type of aesthetic you choose to express the looks you have, is your secondary niche, right? To enhance the appeal you have, right? Or the vibe you give off, right? So boom. So you got bad boys, you know what I'm saying? You got the classy dudes, you know what I'm saying? You got the kind of classy niche, that preppy archetype niche. They're pretty much like tropes, right? Same shits, So you got the bad boys, you got the preppy niche trope, right? So
life as a man is simple. You dress well, work hard.
Like the older money niche, older money niche. No, this is like the most perfect video I've seen. So old money niche is like wealth. That's like wealth, like rich luxury wealth type of dude, right? So that preppy, kind of like that preppy, savage kind of guy. You know what I'm saying? That's old money. These are just examples briefly. For example, some primary aesthetics have a primary and secondary that go with them. You can hybrid. You could be a hybrid. You can mix them up, but some primaries, like for example, like the pretty boy look, right? That's a primary genetic aesthetic, right? But you can enhance it because it has a secondary aesthetic. For example, like if you're a relatively decent looking guy, but you pretty boy max, right? Even though you don't have the primary aesthetic, you know what I'm saying? You're gonna get some of its effects, maybe not all of it, but you're gonna get some of its effects if you do your hair nice, right? If you do your hair nice and you dress a certain way, you wear flowy clothes, or you get what I'm saying. If you tap into that soft boy aesthetic, you're gonna get into that niche a little more. Even if you're like a relatively average looking dude, you're gonna tap, because that's the secondary stuff you're putting over yourself. You know what I'm saying? So some primaries have the primary and secondary versions of it, right? Same thing with hypermasculine. Some dudes, you gotta do it at your own discretion though, because you gotta do what fits you. But some for example, like hypermasculine, like some dudes, think about it, when most dudes go into the military, what they do, they get a buzz cut. We know buzz cuts halos a lot of people, but it actually shows a lot of people. Halos too, in a way, because some guys have robust jaws and certain things to fit into that niche. Even some younger guys, right? So even if they're not probably the most robust looking dude, they're like, dang, I don't look that bad with a buzz cut. You know what I'm saying? Kind of tap more into that masculine. So that's a secondary version of that, like kind of keeping a short haircut. You know what I'm saying? Wearing more gym clothes. You know what I'm saying? Like, let's see. Right? Kind of wearing rugged, you know what I'm saying, gym clothes like this, you know what I'm saying, kind of gymmy type clothes that shows your muscles, right? You know what I'm saying? Yeah, like compressions and stuff like that, right? Tees and compressions, see, you know what I'm saying? Jackets, certain kind of jackets, like military jackets, like Air Force jackets. It's just an example Oh my bad, Air Force what? Air Force jackets, right? Boop. Not these ones, but yeah, like that, like what this guy's holding. Air Force jackets and stuff like that. Little stuff like that. To tap into that masculine effect. But of course, this all depends on your primary looks. But if you're somewhat, if you're somewhat compatible, even the secondary effects of the will work for you too. So some primaries have secondary versions of themselves too, more like stylish versions, right? And then some secondaries are just secondaries, like the bad boy look. Like you can be an either primary cat. You can be a hyper masculine bad boy, Jason Strenham. You could be a aesthetic or a Chad, like type of just traditionally handsome type of bad boy. You're just regularly handsome, right? And a bad boy, you could be a pretty boy kind of bad boy, kind of vibe. You know what I'm saying? You got examples, some vampires, you got examples of that, like kind of dark triad, but Anakin Skywalker from Star Wars, you know what I'm saying? So yeah, man, so you got different examples of it, and that's generally niches overall, just certain aesthetics you're fitting, and certain aesthetics you're fitting, and if I sound boring and stuff like that, that's because I'm in a chill mood. So this is more of a descriptive video than a reactive video, just kind of like just talking on something. So it's just a vibe, it's more intellectual. I'm not really, sometimes I'm funny, sometimes I'm not. It depends. I can't force it. But yeah, bear with me. But yeah, and getting that through, so getting that kind of stuff through. Now that I got kind of like the over idea of niching and stuff like that for you guys, let me tell you why it works, right? We Waffles went over this in a more descriptive video, and more of that using graphs and charts, just bullshit. I don't like doing it like that. I kind of like being saucy with it, but I'll pretty much say what he said because he kind of describes it perfectly here. So pretty much niche maxing. So for example, when you niche max, essentially it works best. People who are extremely good looking, it probably don't work the best for them, but are like automatically people who are very high, people who are already naturally like 8s and 9s naturally without niching, they probably won't benefit because they might shave down their pill. But if you're like a 5, if you're like a 4 or 5, this is the best for guys like you, like 4s and 5s and shit like that. Even 6s too, especially 6s. That's how some 6s could turn to Chads in some women's eyes and stuff like that, right? Because of a type, that's my type, right? You know what I'm saying? So to keep stuff simple, you could be, let's say, a guy's average looking, right? And let's say guy's average looking and he walks up to some girl, right? We're obviously not talking about when he already knows her and stuff. We're talking about like trying to get her attention, her attraction, right? We're just trying to get her attraction up off of presence, how you look, everything about you, right? Off of presence coming up. So let's say you're trying to get a girl to be attracted to you, right? A guy's like an average Joe Smo, let's say a white male, right? If that same white male, if he became, let's say she liked bad boys, right? So if he came to her as a 5 out of 10, right? To be fair, she might give him basic, choosing signals, right? Basic attraction energy, right? Or his points, or on dating apps, or whatever he's trying to do. He might get like a basic or below average reactions, right? Feedback. But let's say he wants to appeal to girls, let's say he wants to appeal to girls that are what you would call it, let's say he wants to appeal to girls that are, I don't know, let's say you want to appeal to young girls, right? I know there's other archetypes that appeal to them, but this is just one of them, right? Let's say he wants to appeal to young girls, and let's say he wants like one night stands or very passionate. He wants very passionate, kind of like obsessive kind of, you know what I'm saying, thing, because that's kind of what bad boys get, right? So obviously, you know what I'm saying, obviously you got to have like the personality, you kind of got to have the mentality and the personality fit. You don't got to be a criminal or anything like that, but you got to have the personality and the natural instincts, you know, the natural low you know, the low inhibition, you know what I'm saying, you got, uh you know, you keep chasing her and stuff like that. You kind of not afraid to take risk, right? Shit like that. You gotta have a little bit of edge to you. Like some guys have edge to them. Like some guys naturally, they're not in the hood, they're not ghetto, you know, but you don't mess with them. They're willing to fight or beat down. You know, some guys just naturally have an edge to them. Like you're like, whoa, like that guy, he don't strike me as a monster, criminal, or anything like that. So, but even that works too. That works too. But he don't strike me necessarily like that. But you know what I'm saying? He has a certain edge to him. He has a certain like mystique to him and stuff like that, based off how he acts and just his mentality on things and the way his demeanor, you know what I'm saying, and activities he chooses to be in, right? So just stuff like that. Damn, this video is getting long thing. I'm gonna have to chop this shit the fuck up. But I apologize for that. But yeah, you know what I'm saying? So that goes into that. And yeah, then that's a niche maxim for you guys. And if he fed into, oh yeah, my bad, like I was saying, so if he fed into that, those same girls, you know, let's say he was a 5, he can go up to like an 8 to some girl. No, my bad. On very rare occasions, he can go up to an 8, right? From a 5 to an 8 to some girls on very rare occasions. That's girls who really like it, right? But I'll say he can go up to, if he's a 5, he can go up to like a 6 to 7 max, bro, off a niche maxing. Now, the amount of girls who find him like that are only going to be the ones within that niche that appeal to that niche. He's going to appeal more to that. And I feel like for most guys, you know, unless you're like some like PSL god or something already, just off rip, right, without trying, you know what I'm saying? Unless you're that, you know what I'm saying? I think it benefits all guys who are at least above a 4, you know, a 4 or 2, but really all guys who are above at least a 4, you know what I'm saying? Even like a 4.5, you know, I think it applies all of them. If you want some decent success, you should niche max to what works for you, what you kind of fit into. And you should approach those type of chicks that are into that kind of stuff. You know, that's a good way to start. You know, that's a good way to get started. You know, this isn't going. You know, not everyone's gonna be successful. You know what I'm saying? But it's something. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, it can at least max you out 2 more points than what you already have. To be honest, most 10s are just niche max 9s, to be honest with you. What I mean by that, most 10, there's no such thing as objective 10. Most 10s are just 9s or 8s who, most 10s are 9s or 8s who they fit into a broad amount of people niche. Like, for example, if someone's a 9, but they have blonde hair, if a guy really likes blondes, right, he really likes that kind of like blonde Aryan look, she's going to be a 10 to a lot of dudes. You know what I'm saying? Because she's gonna be considered a 9.5 or 10 to a lot of dudes if she's already like an 8.5 or 9, because she's a blonde blue-eyed or blonde green-eyed chick. You know what I'm saying? If some dudes like dark-haired brunettes, right, like an Italian chick, let's say an Italian chick is like an 8.5 or a 9, if she appeal maxes to a certain look or something that's like that person like, that whole broad range of fans are gonna deem her a 10 or a 9.5 or a perfect 10. So that's all that last number is subjective. That, like, most people would call the 10s are really just very attractive people who fit a niche that they really like. So it kind of gives them that extra bonus. So that's usually how it works. But yeah, that's how niche maxing works in general in a nutshell. I'm going to go into each niche individually, and yeah, and that's it.